My name is Helen Jbeily. I'm a board member and curator of the Agriculture in Kings County exhibition. This display on domestic agriculture was curated by our board member and curator, Denise Raulino. And this display shows how women and children were an important part of the farm and farm life, and they worked just as hard on the farm, in the home, as out in the fields. This young man is churning butter in a white cedar butter churn, which would then go over to his mother, who is using a butter paddle to knead salt into the butter. Some other interesting things in this display are the skimmed milk can, where milk would be poured into the can, and then the ladle was used to scoop the cream out of the milk, which would then be used to make the butter. And then the left behind milk, the watery milk, was often given to the pigs as a special treat for them. And then as a special treat for the family, we have an ice cream maker. So this would have been an early ice cream maker, the North Pole freezer, where the cream went in with ice and they churn it up and the ice cream comes out. In this room, we talk about farm workers in Kings County. And this is actually my favorite room in the exhibition. We are fortunate that we have photographs from the collection at the Library of Congress that were taken right here in Corcoran of farm worker camps in the 1930s. These three photos are very special. They were taken by one of the most famous American photographers, Dorothea Lange. Dorothea Lange, you might recognize her photograph, Migrant Mother, which is one of the most famous photographs in the world. And Dorothea Lange was sent by the Farm Security Agency in the 1930s to Kern County, Tulare County, and Kings County to photograph migrant farm worker camps. So this is a series of photographs that Dorothea Lange took at a camp outside of Corcoran. And you see the housing and children that are playing in front of the houses. And it's just really special to have photographs from this incredible photographer who was right here in Kings County documenting this important history. Further down, we have another series of photographs that are not by Dorothea Lange. They're by a local studio from Corcoran, Powell Studio, from October 1933. But these document the Mexican worker strikes of 1933 in Corcoran. In 1933, there was a boom cotton year, and Mexican farm workers came to pick the crop, and the farm workers in their union asked for $1 per $1 per 100 pounds of cotton picked. Now, the growers wanted to pay about half of that, so there was a big standoff throughout the summer and the fall, which unfortunately resulted in a violent clash in October of 1933, where several farm workers were killed by armed growers. These photographs were taken in the immediate aftermath of that clash, where the farm workers are striking, and you can see them holding these very evocative signs that say, "Disarm the rich farmer," or "Arm the worker for self-defense." And this sign here says, "Join the picket lines, don't scab." Scab was a slang term for when you went to work rather than join the picket line and join the strike. So these are, again, really incredible photographs that are in the Library of Congress that show an important story from the history of our county. Farm workers are an important part of the history of agriculture in Kings County, and it's amazing that these photographs in particular are housed in the Library of Congress and telling this important history. This display talks about Black Americans' migration to Kings County from Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas, and other southern states during the Dust Bowl. Many came to Kings County to escape the Dust Bowl and to work at California farms. And in Kings County, there were some important settlements like Red's Camp and the Big House and Irons Camp in Stratford. And they were an important part of the community that are still here in Hanford and Kings County. In May 1880, a dramatic clash occurred in present-day Hanford between land settlers and the Southern Pacific Railroad. For the previous decade, settlers had moved onto land that the railroad owned but didn't yet have the titles for. Eventually, the railroad did acquire those titles, but they then tried to charge the settlers at an increased market price for the land that they had already been improving and growing on for the last 10 years. This then caused a significant legal dispute that went out for years and years and was fought through the courts. Public opinion was on the settlers' side against the railroad, but ultimately the courts found in favor of the railroads and said that the railroad could charge the settlers the market price for the land that they had been on for the last 10 years. This was obviously not popular, and it ultimately resulted in a big, dramatic, violent clash in present-day Hanford, which is now known as the Mussel Slough tragedy. A U.S. Marshal went out with several other locals to evict the settlers from their land, and violence ensued. One man shot at the settlers, and then there were shots back and forth, and eventually 7 men died by the end of the altercation. Now, this incident and the legal battle that followed were the subject of immense public interest and journalistic interest. The incident and the trial were widely covered in newspapers, and we have some of the political cartoons that were in newspapers at the time, which show the greedy railroad monopoly monster squeezing out settlers and other industries. You can see at the bottom left of this, it says Mussel Slough, and there's a gravestone that says killed by the railroad monster, talking about the Hanford settlers. And this political cartoon shows another railroad monster punching through a house where the settlers and their family and their livestock and all these children are having to run away from this horrible railroad creature. There's also the face of one of the Southern Pacific Railroad owners. I believe this one is Mr. Crocker in the wheel. Leland Stanford's face is in the octopus monster there. So it was very unpopular what the railroad did. Now, after the clash, there was a trial about Mussel Slough, but it wasn't putting the railroads on trial for killing these settlers. It was actually the other settlers who had survived the tragedy. They were put on trial for resisting a U.S. Marshal, and they were found guilty. Now, these men, they were called the Mussel Slough Five. They were given a fine of $300 each and sentenced to 8 months in prison. Now, again, there was so much public interest in this trial that we have a photograph that the Mussel Slough Five took immediately after their trial, and it was a fundraising souvenir photo. So they sold this picture to the public to pay for the fine from their trial. We also have a very interesting handwritten poem that was read at the 1-year anniversary of the Mussel Slough tragedy that was written by a local doctor. And I'll just read one of the stanzas. Fresh in memory are the lives of those whose bodies in these graves repose. Fresh in our memory is the noble stand that the departed ones took in defending their land. Fresh are these memories, and that is why around these graves our breath a sigh. So this was a very sad incident, but it was also certainly a very dramatic incident that captured the public attention and captured their sorrow for a long time after. Aaron Tyner was the town's first blacksmith. His family settled here in the mid-1800s, around 1870, and he actually was the father-in-law of the first person killed in the Mussel Slough tragedy, whose name was James Harris. His daughter had married James, and then after he was killed in the Mussel Slough tragedy, she went on to remarry. Aaron Tyner, before he became the town blacksmith, actually opened Hanford's first mill, which he then sold to Horatio Lacey, who founded Lacey Milling Company, which has been in the town for over 100 years. But Aaron Tyner, after he sold that mill to Mr. Lacey, opened a blacksmith shop. We can see some of the cattle brands that he made in his day-to-day job. But what's also interesting is we have a cane that was made by Mr. Tyner out of various woods and petrified wood. And what's very interesting is we also have this family photo of the Tyners where his son Charles is holding the cane that we have on display here. All of this was lent to us by the Burris Park Museum, by the county. His daughter donated all of his effects to the county museum. And I just think it's such a nice way to see that while these brands may have been his day-to-day job, he truly was a craftsman with skill. And so he made this cane as a way to show off what he could do outside of just pulling iron. And this was just an interesting, happy accident with curating, that Mr. Tyner is here. And then we'll talk about Mr. Lacey over here in this other display. But Mr. Lacey was one of Mr. Tyner's honorary pallbearers at his funeral. And we had already planned out the displays and decided where everything would go when we learned that fact. And it's just such a happy accident of curating that these men who knew each other in real life over 100 years ago, today we're able to place them near each other in this exhibition and tell their stories.